Well, welcome to Ask the Experts, the Tri-City Regional Chamber of Commerce's series to help business leaders grow their companies with practical advice and answers you can implement right away. Special welcome to those watching on Zoom as well. You're a valuable part of our audience today, and for those that are watching on YouTube sometime in the future. My name is Paul Casey. I'm the Executive Director of Leadership Tri-Cities, and I'll be privileged to be your facilitator again today. This is a free benefit of your chamber membership, and it would be possible without the generous sponsorship of STCU. And with us today is one of our experts, Charlie Drader. Charlie, why don't you welcome the crowd?
Thank you. Director of Commercial Banking at STCU here in Tri-Cities. I know someone from PorterKinney. Just want to say thank you all for being here. Thank you to Paul and for the Chamber for continuing to put this series on. And thank you to the fellow panelists. Just looking forward to all we hear today.
Yeah. Thank you again for your support of Ask the Experts. So for approximately half of our 90 minutes together, our experts will be presenting their gold nuggets on our topic of business finance wisdom. So the beginning of the journey, the middle of the journey, and the end of the journey. So hopefully you're going to get something out of at least one, if not all three of those stages of business. And then for the second half, they will answer your questions. And if you'd like to ask a question, and we encourage everyone in the room to think of one question to ask the experts, whether you're virtual on Zoom or if you're here, you can text me at no, we don't have.
I don't have that slide.
Okay, no worries, no worries. So just if you're here in the room, you just raise your hand, we'll call on you. If you're on Zoom, go ahead and type it into the chat and I'll curate those and I'll bring those to the experts' attention. Their contact information, there are some cards in the back, right by the fish bowl. Hopefully you put your card in the fish bowl. You could still do that because we have a giveaway later. So make sure you do that at some point during our talk today. So let me introduce our speakers today. So Charlie Drader, as he said, is the Director of Commercial Business Development at STCU. He has a business degree from Washington State University and over 20 years of commercial banking experience. He spent his career working with business owners to grow their businesses and improve efficiencies. Chris Porter, CPA, is part of the CPA firm PorterKinney. He has an accounting degree from Brigham Young University and an MBA from Washington State. He focuses on helping business owners achieve increased profitability while minimizing their tax liability. Nick Haberling, over on the end, is a financial advisor with HFG Trust. He has a business degree from Gonzaga University and over 10 years of experience in the financial services industry. He's dedicated to building prudent financial strategies that follow an evidence-based approach. So let us welcome our experts today. Kick it up.
All right. So whether you are starting a business, acquiring a business, or maybe just trying to expand one, financing plays a key part of that. So two questions we get a lot of when it comes to financing. People will come in and they'll ask, what do I need for down payment for a commercial loan? Or, what's my capacity? And the answer is always, well, it depends. And so I'm going to try and kind of pull back some of that, the it depends part. And so explaining, what it takes to become bankable or eligible for financing. And then the second piece is going to be the importance of your financial statements with that. So there's different ratios and things, but it's going to be your high quality financial statements that's going to be used in that analysis. So, so the first question, what is it? What do I need for a down payment? And that's going to come down to what are the funds being used for? It depends. There's no blanket answer. So most of us we're familiar with a home loan. So conventional is probably going to be 20% down. And the reason for that is that 80% is after paying so there's repossession costs, there's marketing costs or selling costs. That 80% is what's going to be left to pay that loan back. If the financial institution has to take that back for repayment of the loan. So the same thing applies in business, except for not everything's a home. So on that home, you look at what's the resale market. The homes are buying and sell all the time. There's a lot of people out there to be able to buy that home back. As we start to get into commercial collateral, there's a more limited pool on that resale, market. So, for example, commercial vehicle, if it's just a business truck, same as a consumer truck, you probably have a big resale market. Anybody could be a potential, buyer of that. And so you're gonna need a smaller down payment or the, institutional lend a higher LTV against that. As we start to get into commercial equipment though, say you're a metal fabricator with a CNC machine. Not everybody's in the market for a CNC machine. It's gonna be other metal fabricators are gonna be the ones to do it. And so we're gonna want a larger down payment on that, because it's not as easy for us to resell it. Jumping down to the bottom, a commercial building. A lot of people look at that and go, yeah, but it's real estate, shouldn't it just be 20%? If it's a retail space or if it's an office space, that could probably be utilized by a bunch of different, business types, business owners that, might be interested in buying that. But if you've got a gas station or C-store or a car wash, the only person that's gonna buy that car wash is gonna be somebody who wants to own a car wash. And so again, your resale pool is a lot smaller. And so the down payment's gonna go up, on those special purpose, property types. So that's where when people come in and just want a blanket answer of, what's the down payment requirement? It really depends on what the underlying collateral is and what that secondary resale market is for that type of collateral. Another thing a lot of people use, or need financing for is, working capital, so short-term assets, a line of credit. Same thing, it's, you don't just, come in necessarily and say, I need a $500,000 line of credit. It's gonna depend on what the underlying collateral is. And so short-term assets, such as inventory or accounts receivable, may be able to be used to collateralize, that operating line. But same thing, not all inventory is created the same. If you've got a concrete company and you have rebar, we can probably take that rebar back and we can probably resell that to somebody, but it's gonna be discounted. The market's not as big, or people are gonna want discounts, so maybe we'll go 50% on that. But if you want a restaurant, your inventory is produce, meats, cheeses, but that's gonna spoil by the time we take it. So doesn't make good collateral for an operating line. So the underlying collateral makes a big difference. Accounts receivable, so that is something, we can take a lien on accounts receivable. But same thing, it depends on if you've got a couple of large ARs to just a handful of clients. But one of those goes bad, it impacts the pool a lot more than if you have, 1,000 different accounts to different people. And so if you've got a large pool of ARs, we will probably lend a higher percentage of those than if you just have a select few, because there's more risk with each one of those ARs. So when it comes to collateral or LTVs or what we will lend against stuff, the underlying collateral really matters. And that's why there's no blanket answer for, what's required for a commercial or a business loan. So the second part is that, how much can I borrow? And that's repayment capacity. So back to the mortgage, might be, a debt to income ratio. And so it's, for every dollar of loan payments that you have, you divide it by your income, and that's your debt to income. And for consumer lending, that's the ratio that's going to be used. So in business to commercial, we do something kind of similar, but we're going to flip that upside down. So we put the debt service, so the monthly loan payments, not the actual balances, but just the monthly payments in the denominator. And then in the numerator, instead of income, for a business, we use cash flow. Reason being is you could, for your income, you might have different tax write-offs. You might be taking depreciation, or you might be taking, using amortization or things that really is not a true cash expense. And so that money's still in your pocket, able to make a loan payment. And so we will still include that in the cash flow analysis of the numerator. But again, what does that ratio need to be? Well, it depends. So if you're an accounting firm, you've got, same people coming in to do their taxes year over year, quarterly financials. It's a pretty steady, reliable, consistent level of cash flow. go back to the car wash example from earlier, you know, cash flow can be very seasonal. Weather, you know, if it's raining, you're not washing as many cars. And it's, people pay for out of disposable income. When things are good, maybe they wash their car once a week. When things are not good, once a month. So in that one, you've got a lot more, you know, risk with, is that gonna be a consistent, reliable, stream of cash flow? So in the CPA firm, you know, maybe we want that ratio to be like a 115. So for every dollar of debt, you're making $1.15 of cash flow. But if it's, you know, more chance of something of ups and downs, we may want that to be more like a 140 or 150. So what kind of business it is, and what those sources are, really, really matters. The other piece here is gonna be, projection based. So it's hey, I make this, but if I can buy this piece of equipment, I can make this much more. And I'll say, financial institutions are not usually, gonna lend into, those projections. We're looking for the, what have you actually made? You can maybe leverage that up to go buy the next thing. But not, on a conventional basis, we're not typically gonna, rely on, or include those projections in your, cash flow. So where do we pull that information from? Financial, statements. And I think what I really want to hammer home here is read your financial statements. You know, when people come in and you apply for a mortgage, I think, you know, you hand over your pay stub, or, you know exactly what you make. The amount of people that will come in with financial statements, and then we'll call with questions later and go, hey, you've got a, you know, a negative asset on here. Do you actually owe that money? Is that, you know, what is that? And people go, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. I didn't look at it. Before you bring your financials in to turn them over to you know, a lender, make sure you've skimmed through it, that you know what's in there. Other piece on an income statement, sometimes we'll use a tax return, for the income statement. What you put on there is what we're gonna underwrite to. So, you know, we'll have a lot of people that'll say, hey, I've got a really good, accountant, you know, so that I don't have to pay taxes. And so, you know, it shows losses greater than what, you know, that's not reality. It's what we have to work with. So we're gonna use what's in that statement. On the balance sheet, you know, going back to the collateral question, you ask somebody and say, you know, what do we have for collateral? And they say, oh, take my business, it's worth $1 million. But then you get that balance sheet and you look down retained earnings or the equity in it is like 50,000. And so it's like, what, you know, what's missing from that balance sheet? Now, a lot of times it won't include inventory, accounts receivable. A lot of people put that in QuickBooks. So if you're gonna bring that balance sheet in, but you've got large ARs, you know, a lot of times we'll ask for an AR aging schedule as well, to show what those ARs are. But if that's not it, if there's, you know, if we don't have ARs or inventory or something like that, it's gonna be tough to take a balance sheet that doesn't show, you know, $1 million in assets and give you $1 million loan against that. So, other things that could be included is intangible assets. So there is value to your book of business. There is value to, you know, to the name, recognition. It's just hard to lend into that. So, you know, that would kick us over to some kind of a, unsecured, loan, which is gonna have different parameters and a little bit more difficult to qualify for. So, so what if we go through that and you're like, Jesus, that doesn't work for me? Or especially if I'm just trying to start a business, I don't have proven cash flow. I don't have any assets yet. You know, how do you do that? And I'll say most of the time, I'm gonna point to what about a consumer loan against your home? Or are you willing to put your home up for collateral? If you're buying a business, can you get the seller to carry a contract? You know, a lot of times we'll see that where it's structured over, you know, 10 or 15 years, but with maybe a 2 or 3 year repayment. So I buy that business, the person selling it to me carries it on contract. I now get my 2 years of history so that I can prove to the bank that I'm now bankable and I can go pay that note off. But they may be willing to kind of carry that until you get to that point where you are bankable. You know, family, friends, are you willing to put your retirement on the line for something that you believe in? Or there are some government programs, but I talk about SBA, or government programs, that's a whole nother topic. You know, those could be possibilities. SBA typically does not, if there's no, if the assets aren't there, SBA won't usually make up for, loan to value. They might go a little bit higher, but they won't go, unsecured. SBA will do a little bit more on the projections. So if you've got something that's projection based, that's where SBA may come into. So there we go, a little bit about, you know, what it takes to be eligible for financing. I will pass it on to you.
All right. So, heard someone say, let's go back to that last slide here. I once heard someone say that if you can't qualify for traditional financing, you need to get money from one of the three Fs: friends, family, or fools. Maybe that's a little more detail on that bullet point there, so. All right, well, as you can see, we are talking about funding a business, growing a business, and selling a business. And I have the very large topic of growing a business. Because that would take probably 75 hours to discuss, we're going to take a very narrow slice of growing a business, and that is pricing. As I've worked with hundreds of business owners over about 18 years, I've realized that a lot of businesses, especially in this area, are making a lot of mistakes with their pricing model. So I want to dive into that and see if there's not a little bit of value here for pricing for profit, pricing for growth, rather than doing what a lot of people are doing, and that is pricing for bankruptcy. So I'm going to give you 4 suggestions today, 4 suggestions on how to price for profit. The first one is be careful with below market pricing. This is one of my favorite quotes here. I can't give you a surefire formula for success, but I can give you a formula for failure. Try to please everybody all the time. There are a lot of business owners in the Tri-Cities and in other metropolitan areas who are charging prices that are way below the market because they are trying to please everybody all the time. One thing that's important to realize is there are a certain segment of the population that cannot be pleased no matter what you do. You could give away your product for free and they're still going to complain. So pleasing everybody all the time is a failed strategy. You can't do that with below market pricing, so don't try. So let's talk about why. Let's talk about some psychology here. Why do people charge rock bottom prices for their products and services when they know they're not going to make any money at that price? I literally know people, I know businesses in the Tri-Cities, I won't mention their names, who charge prices that are substantially below market. They win awards, they get a lot of praise, they have a lot of Google reviews, they make nothing. And the only one that knows they make nothing is me as their accountant, of course, them. Why do they do that? Well, let's look at this. Profit or praise, there's a little bit of tug of war. So I've got a diagram here. This is the number of compliments you get, and this is the price you charge. And let's suppose for a second that the average price of your products is $400. Let's suppose you charge $400, which is like a fair average market price. You will get maybe a couple compliments. You might have someone say, hey, that sounds fair, or good job, or sure, I'll buy. But let's suppose you charge $300 or $200 or $100. As you can see, the number of compliments you're going to get is going to go up exponentially. And while I'm seeing smiles and I'm hearing Paul Casey laugh, this is actually something that we need to be aware of because we're getting advice from the wrong people. The clients will tell us what good people we are. They'll say, you're ethical, you're amazing, you're not like the crook down the street. Thank you so much for being above board. You will just hear so many compliments as you have a below market price. And if you need that to feel good about yourself, you're going to stick with that below market price. And you're going to continue to lose money year after year after year. I remember a couple that came into my office many, many years ago, and I looked at their tax returns going back a few years, and they made a combined total of about $90,000. One of them made $100,000 from their day job, and the other one managed to lose $10,000 every single year. But believe me, that business has lots of 5-star reviews with things like, unlike everyone else, they charge a fair price, they're fair, they're ethical, they're amazing, and they lose money. Number 2, very closely related to number 1, be very careful with discounts. So let's look at a sample profit and loss statement. We're going to come up with a fake business here, Jane's Printing and Design. We're going to say that Jane brings in or is projected in 2024 to bring in about $1 million in total revenue. And then, of course, she has all these expenses, cost of goods sold, advertising, auto expense, payroll. And in the end, her net income is $100,000. So she keeps 10% of the total income that comes into her business. That's a 10% margin. Everyone with me? With me so far? Okay. If Jane discounts her services by 10%, how much of her profit would she give up? You can answer it out loud.
All of it.
All of it, right? Because if instead of bringing in $1 million of sales, she brings in 900,000 of sales, which is the 10% discount, all of her profit is given up. Think about that for a second. I've seen situations like that. In fact, I had a couple that came to my office about 7 or 8 years ago, and their business was really struggling. They were literally struggling to pay bills, to get food on the table. And the wife said, you know why we're struggling? It's because he can't stop giving away discounts to absolutely everyone. And she told me that he would come up with excuses. Every person that came into the business, he'd come up with some kind of excuse to give him a discount. We need to be very careful with that, because if you're not careful, you can give away not 10% of your profit, but 100% of your profit. Okay, let's flip the question around. If Jane increases her prices by 10% and keeps all of her customers, I know that's a big assumption, we'll talk about it in a second, how much will her profit increase?
100%.
100%. She will double her profit. So isn't that an interesting situation we have? And a lot of people are in this situation. A 10% discount gives away all of the profit. A 10% price increase doubles the profit. And a lot of business owners need to be aware of this, that pricing is not just a component of your profitability, it is the main component of your profitability when you think about your business model. Our third question, will a 10% increase or decrease in pricing significantly affect Jane's customers versus how will it affect Jane? Let's say Jane's average transaction price is $100. And you come into Jane's printing place and you get a discount and it's $90. And of course you give Jane compliments, that's what she's looking for. Is that gonna affect you very much, paying 90 instead of 100? Like, is your life significantly changed? But if Jane does that with every one of her customers, is her life significantly changed? Yes, she's heading towards bankruptcy, or hopefully married to a brain surgeon. Let's go on the flip side. Let's say you go into Jane's business and she charges you 110, whereas she previously charged you $100. Is that going to significantly affect your finances? Probably not. Business owners think they're being so charitable with these discounts that they're giving. Oh, I'm just helping someone. They really needed help, so I charged them 90 instead of 100. You didn't help them at all. That's $10. You're not helping. How about instead, you increase your prices by 10%, make the 200,000, and then do some significant help in the community. Maybe help our homeless shelter in Pasco build a new men's shelter, which they're hoping to do. Maybe write a $5,000 check. I call that being charitable with profits, not with pricing. I was almost charitable with pricing a few years ago. I had a gentleman sitting across from me and he teared up a little bit and talked about his really challenging financial situations. And I almost opened my mouth to give him a discount until I realized the reason he was struggling is because private school tuition was high. His Cadillac Escalade payment was a lot. He borrowed 100 grand. He's making $400,000. No, I'm not going to be charitable for his cause. He's just bad at spending. We're going to charge a fair market price and then be charitable for causes that actually are important. Another story, small struggling business. A business owner came into me and talked to me. This is a number of years ago. And he said, I'm really struggling. I'm not making any money. Can you help me figure out why? And I said, well, how's your pricing? That's where I always start out. And he said, it's fine. It's fair. I said, how does it compare to your competitors? It's pretty comparable. No, I'm charging kind of what they're charging. I said, are you giving out any discounts? He said, yes, but only to friends and family. I said, well, what are you doing for paid marketing? Are you advertising on TV, doing Google ads, doing internet ads? And he said, no, most of the people that come are just referrals. I said, okay, so most of your clients are friends and family. He said, yeah. He said, so most of your clients get the discount. And he paused and he said, I needed to hear that. And that was the case. He was discounting more than half of the services he was doing. Number 3, pay attention to supply and demand. So I have here a photo of what's called the Pink Star Diamond. In 2017, the Pink Star Diamond was sold at an auction for $71 million. Pretty significant. Why such a high price? Why such a high price? It turns out there aren't many 59.2 carat flawless pink diamonds in the world. In fact, there's only one. So this is the principle of supply and demand. The higher the demand, the higher the price. Obviously, there's a lot of demand for a 59-carat flawless diamond. I'd sure like one. Anyone else would like one? A lot of demand. Everyone wants one. Amy wants one for sure.
I want one.
Okay, so the higher the demand, the higher the price, and of course, the lower the supply, the higher the price. That's the principle of supply and demand. If you take an economics class at a university, you'll see the supply and demand graphs, how they move, and then you'll get to the 200 level and they'll start using calculus, and you get to the 300 level and it's just totally crazy. That's when I dropped economics and switched to accounting, by the way. But this is the principle. Higher the demand, higher the price, lower the supply, higher the price. Diamond like this, there's only one, tons of people want it, therefore the price goes up to 72 million. So pay attention to this in your own business. You may not sell diamonds, but you need to just pay attention to these macroeconomic forces. Some business owners ignore supply and demand. They refuse to increase their prices even when demand is increasing or supply is limited. This was interesting during COVID. Some people, even though inflation was at 8–9% in the United States, some business owners dug their heels in and they said, I'm not going to do that to my customers. Well, what happens to a business like that? They're refusing to increase prices, but are their prices from their suppliers increasing? Yes, so their margins are just getting thinner and thinner until they go to business. You can't ignore these macroeconomic factors. You don't even need to apologize about them to your clients. They're not your fault. Inflation is not any of our faults. This is a huge global economy that we work in. So if a business owner has long waiting lists, wait times, scheduling out several months, these are all indications that perhaps a price increase is in order due to high demand or low supply. An example, several months ago, I was trying to get my son music lessons. He was trying to learn a particular instrument. I won't tell you the instrument because that'll narrow down who is the culprit of the story. But we'll pretend it's the guitar. He was trying to get guitar lessons. It wasn't. He was trying to get guitar lessons. So I called up several places. They wouldn't even answer my call. Finally, I got a hold of someone and he said, oh man, do you know how many people want guitar lessons right now? It's crazy. My phone is ringing off the hook. He said, I'm way out. I got a huge waiting list. I'm scheduled way out. I'm sorry, I can't take you right now. And I said, wow. It sounds like you need to increase your prices. And he laughed and said, my wife makes that same joke as well. And I said, it's not a joke. You need to increase your prices. And I found out what he was charging substantially below market for his services. He could have doubled it. And I told him, I said, I'll pay double. I said, will you sign me up right now for double? And he said, well, no, because I'll feel bad and I don't want to charge different people different things. They always, on pricing, they'll go to like this ethical high road of like, what you're telling me to do is wrong. What I'm telling you to do is good business sense. There's nothing unethical about running a good business. Finally, solidify a pricing strategy. So a lot of businesses haven't really thought about pricing other than, well, I used to work for Joe's Plumbing, and now I work for my own plumbing company. Joe charged $150 an hour, so I'm going to charge $150 an hour. Or he would charge $150 an hour, so I'm going to charge $110 an hour. That's about as far as a lot of business owners have gotten when it comes to pricing, just comparing themselves to one other business. You got to think more about pricing. Most business owners should think about pricing many, many, many hours a year. They should read about it. They should study it. They should talk to professionals about it because it's key to their business model. Here are 7 pricing strategies. We're not going to have time to discuss all of them because my time's running out. Competition-based pricing. What does the market charge? Are you better or worse than the market? Mark up and down accordingly. Penetration pricing, price low initially to get a larger slice of the market and then try to raise. Price skimming, start high, then lower the price with time. This is common with technology, right? Like TVs and phones and computers. Cost plus, take the price of materials and labor and then add a markup. Loss leader pricing. Sell a product at a loss to attract customers and encourage future sales. What's the loss leader at Costco? Who could tell me?
Chicken.
That's right. I knew someone would know. You can buy the $5 chicken. There's no way they're making money off of that. But man, to buy it, you have to walk all the way through the store past the TVs. By the time you get there, you got like 3 kayaks in your cart. They're just amazing. Hourly pricing, charge a set billing rate per hour, or value pricing, set the price based on the customer's perceived value. There are other pricing strategies, but if you're in business, you need to be familiar with pricing strategies. Most business owners probably only do about 2 or 3 of the 7 of these. Let's zero in just a little bit on competition-based and hourly. Let's take hourly first. There are a lot of downsides of hourly pricing. If you Google things like, is hourly billing dead? You'll see a lot of articles that say yes. Hourly billing is a thing of the past in most industries because clients are uncertain of the price and feel like they're giving you a blank check. Yeah, your kitchen remodel, I'll do that for 100 an hour. How many hours will it take? Oh, I don't know, 50 to 60 to 70-ish. That's a little scary, isn't it? Just giving a contractor or an accountant or an attorney a blank check. Clients may be surprised by the bill, leading to disputes. It's kind of like, I'll tell you how much it costs later, and then we'll argue about it and go to court over it. Not a good pricing strategy. Service providers are motivated to work slowly. I actually had a business owner tell me, I keep telling my guys to slow down a little bit so we can charge the right price. And I just said, listen to what you're saying. Something is wrong. There's a misalignment here. You want them to work slow, the client wants them to work fast. How about we just fix the price at the beginning? Service providers may be discouraged to invest in new technology to make processes more efficient. So a law firm that charges by the hour may not want to invest $50,000 in a new practice management software that allows them to get 20% more efficient, because then they get 20% less revenue. Why would they ever invest in technology? Law firms is my example on this, like a will, for example. Let's say that a law firm spends hundreds of hours over many, many years coming up with 4 templates of a will that they could use for clients, depending on which situation the client is in. And let's say they get the system so well that they could decide within 15 minutes which template to use, and within 45 minutes, they could replace all the fields in the template with your personal information. And let's say that law firm charges $300 an hour. Should they charge $300 for a will? Of course not. Some of them do, but that would be ridiculous. The market value of a will is much higher than $300. The value of a will is much higher than $300. One example of why hourly pricing is kind of a thing that should stay in the 90s or earlier. Second to last slide, competition-based pricing. So let's think about your products and services compared to the competition. So your quality is either going to be superior, the same, or inferior than the competition, and your price is going to be more, the same, or less than the competition. So when you think about your price versus your nearest competitor's pricing, you're probably in one of these 9 boxes. In fact, let's hope you're in one of these 7 boxes, because you're probably not going to tell the community, we have the same quality for more, or we have less quality for more. That would be a losing proposition. So you're probably down to 7 boxes on a competition-based pricing model. You got to be very careful with this box. I ask a lot of business owners, how does your quality compare to your competitors? Oh, it's better. How does your price compare? Oh, it's definitely less. A lot of business owners are trying to do a more for less proposition. That's challenging, isn't it? Because then you have to beat your competitors on 2 fronts, not just on 1. Very few competitors, very few businesses are courageous enough to do a more for more proposition. To look at their competitors in the eye and say, of course we charge more, but we have superior products. Of course we charge more, but you get what you pay for. It's more quality, it's better this, it's better that. There's a lot of big companies, think Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Audi, make a ton of money in this box, and yet it seems like small businesses lack the courage. There is a 10th box. So again, 9 boxes here, we're really narrowing down to 7. There is another box hanging out all the way on its own. And the 10th box is for very unique products and services. So if you have unique differentiation of your product or service, that will force potential customers to decide on factors other than price, because no competitor offers a comparable product or service. And that could be a great place to be in, is when you are a business that, at least in this metropolitan area, there's no one else that has a product and service quite like yours. Therefore, there's no apples to apples comparisons with anyone else. So therefore, you truly can price based on the value of what you're offering. Value pricing is common within this 10th box. So again, is that everything about pricing? No, but hopefully it gives you a little flavor for how you can price your products and services to be more profitable, and a few things to be careful of. We'll take questions at the end, but for now, let's turn it over to Nick.
So we have a little bit of time to do a flyby of business transition planning. which is just really a friendly way of saying selling your business. So I thought I'd break it down into 5 steps here, which is identifying reasons to sell, planning to sell, assembling a team of advisors around you during that process, what the selling process can actually look like, and what life can look like after selling. And then I also include a couple of examples loosely based off of real-world examples that I've been in. One that's not quite a train wreck, but not very smooth, and one that's kind of like a superstar scenario. So we get the reasons to sell. So most business owners sell their business, looking to retire. But when they retire and kind of the decision that gets them there can be a lot of motivating factors behind that, as well as the timeline. So in our scenario, let's say we have Bob and Tim. They're 2 CPA owners. They're in their mid to early 70s. Have a practice generating about $1.6 million in revenue. And then one day Bob walks into Tim's office and he says, like, hey, I can't handle another tax season. Last April was brutal. I'm ready to close up shop and retire. Tim says like, yeah, me too. Let's get this done. So in this scenario, hey, they're both looking to retire. But because you see there's a sense of urgency here. There's not a lot of planning done ahead of time. And we'll see that really impacts the decisions that they're going to make later on, and as well as a lot of the offers and opportunities available. Now we get to planning to sell. So there's a number of steps here. So for starters, benchmarking your business. What is that? So benchmarking your business is looking at how your business essentially compares to your peers and competitors on some key metrics. So an important one could be pricing strategy. How much do you charge for your business? What are your profitability metrics? How many clients do you have per employee and whatnot? Next part is preparing for due diligence. So later on, we'll get a little bit more into due diligence, but due diligence and preparing for it is really the gathering of all the financial statements, the business tax return history, business licenses, operating agreements, any sort of board meeting minutes that you might have, marketing material, anything that someone who wants to run your business would be interested in having post-sale, and as well as just to verify all the information that you're giving them beforehand is accurate. Next part is to consider a business valuation by either a formal group, which could be a business industry group. There's CPAs that have accreditations for that. And there's actually online tools available, because this is going to give you an idea of what your business is worth. You probably would just pick a price for your house before listing it. You might be leaving money on the table. The same thing is with your business. Another thing that's important to understand is emotions are totally normal throughout the process. It's going to be exciting to be thinking about a new adventure. There's going to be stress as you're answering and maybe re-answering questions from potential interested buyers. You might actually have mixed feelings along with it, but just understand the emotions involved. So now when it comes to our scenario here with Bob and Tim, so they haven't, taken advice of benchmarking their practice over the past few years. And so really the benchmarking of their practice and the valuation that they're seeking are kind of the same step here. And unfortunately, they're sad to discover that, hey, they haven't been pricing their services high enough, and their profit margins are actually below the industry average for a firm that's generating 1.6 million in revenue like theirs. After speaking with some of their employees, they realize, hey, most of them are older and actually want to retire as well in the next 3 to 5 years. Their technology is dated. Their tax software provider wants them to switch from a desktop app to an online service. And so when they actually get that valuation, they're a little disappointed to find that they're actually going to be valued at a 10 to 20% discount compared to their peers actually. So if a tax practice was valued, in the industry, we have a lot of multiples, revenue, times earnings. The tax practice was valued at 1 times earnings, let's just say to make it simple, and should get 1.6 million. We're actually looking at a selling price closer to 1.36 million, which would be a little bit of a sad hit to find out about. So now, I have these in a different order of practicing. So now we're gonna get to assembling your team. So I've broken this up into 2 groups here. Those you should consider on your team, and those who I definitely recommend in almost any scenario you're starting. So on the consider part, when we're looking at business brokers and M&A sell-side advisors, You're typically going to work with those two if you don't already have a buyer in mind for your business. So this is, you have no one who's already interested, you don't have private equity groups or anyone calling your phone lines or sending you emails. You're just going in this totally cold. Now, what the business broker is going to do, they're going to work with you to gather the information necessary to put a listing together. They're going to put it on a few different websites. They might actually even proactively reach out to a few people who they've worked with in the past that might be an interested buyer. And for that, they're going to charge some sort of commission, typically a percentage of what the final purchase price of your business is. It could be, anywhere between 3 to 5% oftentimes. The M&A sell-side advisor, they're going to do that same listing as the business broker. They're going to work with you to gather that information, post it on these websites. They're going to proactively call people and probably a little bit more aggressive with it. But they're also going to be a little bit more white glove in the sense that before that, they're going to help you prepare for the due diligence process, work with you to get all those files in one spot. They're going to go ahead. They're going to go ahead and talk with you about what sort of buyers are you looking for? What are your no's and no-go's? What are the left and right limits, the parameters of the buyers that you're interested in working with to make sure that maybe they match the culture of your company. And so when they're fielding those inquiries, they're going to screen those buyers out and then get you a filtered list that hopefully fit your objectives there. And then they're going to manage the due diligence process. They're going to field questions from the inquirers. They're going to pass them along to you to really streamline that and get documents over to those interested buyers. They're going to help with the letter of intent process that's going to happen. And once the letter of intent is signed, they're going to help get you guys to the closing date with negotiations. And for all that, they're going to charge anywhere between 5 to 10% of the purchase price of your business there. On the recommended group, we got your business transaction attorney or M&A attorney. So since you're the seller, your attorney is not going to be probably drafting any sale agreements, but they're going to go ahead and translate the sale agreements that the buyer's attorney has prepared or that they've already had prepared and translate it from legalese into basic English for you to really make sure that what's being presented to you is actually in line with your objectives. Now, just out of experience, probably don't let your attorney, the buyer's attorney, talk for too much. They have a way of getting lost in a lot of details, which you just end up paying for, doesn't figure out. Next, we got your CPA. Hopefully, every business owner has a good relationship with their CPA. During this process, the CPA is going to be making sure that there's no tax surprises from the transaction. So you're going to have capital gains taxes. Maybe you'll have Washington State capital gains taxes, depending on how things are structured over a period of time. Maybe there's depreciation recapture. Maybe there's ordinary income. If there's an interest component from seller financing or seller's note, but they're just there to make sure that there's no tax consequences that you're surprised about. Financial advisor and wealth manager, a little self-serving, but where they come into play is typically throughout your life as a business owner, you funded your lifestyle from probably a salary from the business as a manager and owner, as well as those owner's earnings. And then at the end of this transaction, you're going to be presented with a large sum of cash, potentially some note payments over a period of time. And that advisor is going to help you come up with an investment portfolio that is intended to fund your retirement from the time you sell your business, to your expiration date. Then finally get to estate planning attorney. Everyone should have an estate plan. What I think is worth revisiting in the process of a sale is that perhaps you think about your estate and who gets what assets differently when you transition from this business entity to all these liquid assets that you now have. So in our scenario here, we got Bob and Tim. They've been working pretty late in life. They're in their mid-70s. Older peer group has retired or passed on, so they don't have anyone that they personally know that might be an interested buyer. So they're actually going to go to this business broker here to actually list their practice for sale and see if there are any interested parties that they're not aware of. And to do that, the business broker is going to charge 3%. So if Bob and Tim are trying to get 1.36 million for their business, that business broker is going to be entitled to about $41,000 at the end of that transaction by helping them find a buyer. Now we get to the transaction structures. Now there's four primary components to transaction. I also included terms because you can have as many terms in there to, make things look more valuable in case of earnouts and whatnot. We got, for starters, we got cash. Cash is cash. Now, from the seller's perspective, you may not care where that buyer gets that cash from. But from the buyer's perspective, maybe they get that as business financing by working through STCU or whatnot. Maybe they have a fund, friends and family funding round, friends and family and fools funding round, put together to get you that cash. Or perhaps it comes from their own savings. The next component here is the seller's note or seller's financing. So that is still part of the purchase price, but what they're doing is they're saying like, hey, for whatever reason, I either can't get business financing or it just doesn't make business sense to pay the entire sum of the business, in the first year or whatnot. So they're going to pay you off effectively using the cash flows generated from the business. So we took a look at an example here just really quick. Let's say you have $1 million business and the person is giving you 20% at closing and then 80% being funded via seller's note, payable over 4 years, let's say at a 5% annual interest rate. So on the closing date, that business owner, they're getting $200,000. And then over the next 4 years, they're getting paid $200,000 plus that 5% interest. That's typically going to be funded through the operations of the business. It's a perfectly good way to buy a business, especially if you're a buyer without many means. However, when it comes to you as the seller, there is a little bit of a risk that what happens if you sell the business to someone who either doesn't have the experience and they kind of run it into the ground, or it goes through some rough patches, clients leave, or even if there's just an economic downturn and you're in a cyclical industry, like let's say restaurants, for instance. And then finally, these last two, equity and earnout, this is typically going to be involved for people who are selling their business, but then they're going to be sticking around for a period of 3 to 5 years, let's say. And so equity would just be shares in the surviving entity, so the acquirer's company or what that merged entity would look like. And then an earnout, that's still part of the purchase price. So let's say someone said, they're selling a business for $2 million. Well, still some portion of that $2 million could be contingent upon them meeting certain profitability or revenue metrics. And so those are typically going to be for people, who are sticking around because, only an owner who sticks around should be responsible for an earnout. So now if we get back to our scenario here of the transaction structure with Bob and Tim. So what they found out is after speaking to a few interested parties is that a lot of the more solid businesses, they're actually not very interested in acquiring them even at their lower valuation because they view it as a little bit more of a project to bring it back up to speed. But they actually were able to find a young middle-aged CPA lady who worked for a big company, doesn't have management experience, but views becoming a business owner as a second arc of her career. And so what their transaction structure looks like is Bob and Tim are going to get 10% cash on closing, so $136,000. And then remember, we subtract the business broker's $41,000 from that total. And then the other 90% is going to be through a seller's note, where she's going to be paying them off over a period of years at an interest rate with added interest. Now, if we just kind of pause and look at the selling process here, we kind of talked about is it's really 4 phases that I like to think about it as. There's a preparation phase. And so that's first kind of thinking about, hey, what's the ideal transaction structure that you'd like for your sale? It's building out financial projections because the buyer wants to know, like, hey, what's the revenue and profitability history, and what can we look at moving forward? You want to have an evaluation sales price identified ahead of time, ideally, and then you're gathering your due diligence documents like we talked about. Now, this marketing phase, this only comes into play if you haven't identified that buyer ahead of time, but we see in Bob and Tim's case that they need to do the marketing process. So that's making a listing, contacting prospective buyers, communicating their culture, the vision of their company, their history to those buyers, and then advancing to actually getting indications of interest. Then we get to due diligence. So this is actually, the buyer reviewing the financial statements, the tax returns and whatnot, actually determining like, hey, this is actually a group it's an organization that we want to purchase. And then once the letter of intent is signed, then you get into the final negotiation and closing. So life after selling, life after selling can look very different depending on the transaction and what the goals are of the seller. You can work for the buyer for a number of years. If you're a younger person, who doesn't want to work for the buyer, maybe you're given a lot of cash and you want to try another second act as an entrepreneur. That's pretty important information for a financial advisor to know, because you'll be invested differently if you need those funds in the near future, or you can retire outright. So when we look at Bob and Tim's example, the CPA lady, she buys the firm from them. They stick around for a couple of months to show her all the ins and outs of the company, how the technology works, introduce her to the employees and the important clients. And then they leave and they retire, they close their doors, and there's a little bit of stress that they have, making sure that those seller note payments continue to flow over the next couple of years. That's the end of their story. Now, if you bear with me, I'm going to go through a quick superstar scenario, kind of the same deal here. So we're going to start with Mark. He's an IT guy. He owns a managed service provider company. Also does 1.6 million in revenue. He wants to retire eventually, but he's in his mid to late 50s. And he's really looking to offload some of those day-to-day operations that he doesn't enjoy as much and get back to business development and managing the team members on his team. So he's really looking also for a long-term growth partner. And so in Mark's case, he's done a great job over the years. He's benchmarking his practice. He's making sure his pricing is competitive. He has all the up-to-date vendors for his tech platform providers. He already has his documents put together. And so when he goes to the business valuation stage, he actually finds out that his company might command a 10% premium compared to his peers, which is great news. And then we'll look at building his team. Actually, Mark isn't going to need a business broker, M&A sell-side advisor. So over the years, he's actually joined a peer group of other MSP business owners. And one of the people in his group has actually sold in the past year to a regional IT provider. And he says he had a wonderful experience with them. And he'd be happy to make a warm referral to Mark. And to top that off, he also worked with a business transaction attorney who specialized with working on these MSP sales. And he's happy to make a referral there. And then Mark has a great relationship with his CPA, and he's already been working with a financial advisor to kind of map out what he thinks his cash flow needs would look like in retirement. And so when we get to the actual transaction structure of Mark's deal, he thinks 30% in cash is excellent, is what he's being offered by this regional provider. He's also getting another 50% in equity because this company's talked to him about, hey, what their strategy is, and they think that they can purchase Mark's business for 8 times earnings, and they can get a number of other practices in the area for a similar earnings multiple. And then they're planning within 5 to 7 years to sell to an even larger company for a roll-up multiple of 13 times earnings. And Mark really likes the idea of that. And so he takes equity in a large organization. And then there's also a 20% earnout component, where if he hits certain profitability metrics, his business will be worth more. So Mark, he still does the preparation phase, he skips the marketing, does buyer due diligence, and still gets to the negotiating and close. The life after for him looks a little bit different. He's working for the buyer for a period of years. He's doing the parts of the business he loves, which is business development and working with his team members. And at the end of this, he hopes to get a larger sale price when the parent company sells. There we go. We can move on to Q&A.
Okay, so questions from the group, and we've got 3 great experts here. You can ask any financial questions. I mean, not a personal one, but I mean, just general financial questions, even if it wasn't the topic today, because they all have a wealth of knowledge that they bring with them today. So who's got one to kick off? Here we go.
I missed those ratios for profit versus debt. What were those again?
So on
Cash flow.
cash flow,
Yeah.
so that's where it depends on the different industries.
Yeah.
And so, I'll say a 115 is gonna be a more stable industry type. So the question was, hopefully over here, but what are the ratios, the cash flow ratios that you would need for borrowing? But so a 115 is gonna be a very stable industry, whereas it could go all the way up to maybe about a 140 or 150 if it's a more I think I use the car wash example, something that has a lot more volatility in it. So it's gonna be somewhere between that 115, to a 150.
Wow.
So if a business generated $100,000 of cash flow, they could borrow against that cash flow about $115,000 if they had no other debt.
Opposite. So if they generate 115,000 of cash flow, they could, they'd have capacity for 100,000 of debt service.
Got it.
Can we talk a little bit more? I was thinking about people who are trying to raise capital to get started. I'm thinking about local people that maybe are young kids or whatever that are trying to get started. And I thought of a couple, like there's SBA loans or like connecting with venture capitalists or finding like a mentor or a coach or an investor that will help back them. Do you know of local places that somebody new starting up and just really trying to find that can kind of network and
Is there an angel investor network?
Yes. See, I'm with you. I'm with you, Wayne.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Since you know what I'm trying to do, you're asking.
Well, I think one of the things that we're asking here, obviously, if you need debt financing, like rate financing, then
Yes,
great companies like STCU could offer that, right?
Yeah.
But if you're talking about equity financing, where an investor goes in with a certain amount of cash and actually partners up with you, maybe they get 20% of the business or 50% of the business, then yeah, you're talking about either the lowest level, friends, family, and fools, or just above that, an angel investor, or above that, a venture capitalist. I personally know some people that do angel investing, that have considered doing that in the Tri-Cities. I know in Seattle, there's the Alliance of Angels out of Seattle that have invested some. But the hard part about angel investing and venture capitalists is you can't always just give them a call and get in front of them. Sometimes it's a game of who you know.
Yeah.
Anything else to add to that?
And, I think in some of those, an angel investor, how much of the company are you willing to give up? Are they gonna want an equity portion? I still think if you can't get traditional financing, the 3 Fs is one of the best scenarios. Or again, leveraging other personal assets to, I know people who have, borrowed against a 401k, turn around and, did cash advances on a credit. I mean, they believed in what they were gonna do and they scraped together on the personal side. Is it risky? Absolutely. But if you really believe that much in it,
then you put it on the line.
you put it on the line, yeah.
So you're saying like if you were looking at it to order things, you would try to come together with what you could on your own. So you could maintain all of the ownership. You would go to family, friends, or pools.
Yeah.
Or like last ditch effort, you would try and find an angel investor or.
Yeah, first I'd come in, sit down with one of my lenders and say, here's what I've got, can I get conventional financing? Or how close am I? Or, what's that gap that I need to fill? If it's not that much, maybe I do have equity in my home. Or if I don't, maybe I'm not asking friends or family to finance the whole thing. I'm just saying, can I borrow the extra 5% to get me now bank? But, I'd come in and I'd have that conversation. I'd set my expectations correctly. I'm coming in for kind of an information gathering versus, hey, I'm gonna get a loan today.
What would you say the percentage of, businesses are bought through SBA?
Percentage of new businesses bought through SBA.
Any buying and selling a business, what's the percentage you think of?
I don't know, but I'm gonna guess it's pretty low. SBA, even SBA, usually you need to have a little bit of a background in the business, unless, if you're trying to buy the building, the 504 program is a little bit better, but even a 7A program is, I think less than 10%. And that's just a guess. I don't know. I can pull that information up and get it back out to Paul. But.
Chris, how often do you recommend raising prices?
We recommend it at least annually. I think unless we're in a very unusual situation, I think prices should be at least revisited on an annual basis. So many of the prices, so many of your costs are going to be revalued annually, go up annually. So if you don't go up annually, you're eventually going to have smaller and smaller margins. It's a great question.
Nick, what frequently holds up acquisitions? I know that's part of your job.
Yeah. I'll say what, not what necessarily holds them up, but what can derail them, I think, can be a loss of tempo. Waiting too long for documents to be produced, that can happen. A loss of communication between the parties. A little bit of being too comfortable that you assume that you guys are on the same page and not following up. Yeah, so I think the loss of tempo would be the biggest risk for derailing.
We talk to realtors and other business owners, that trying to struggle to evaluate a business versus the real estate that it occupies. Because the real estate doesn't generate the revenue, the business does. So how do you structure a sale like that? Because we have many friends who have sold businesses simply for the value of the real estate, which is well exceeds the value of the business. How do you manage all of that?
Do you want to go for it? Sure. Yeah, just let me give you an example. So we recently, one of my clients recently sold their business and they had both, they had the business and then they had the real estate. The real estate was 3 separate buildings and the buildings were in separate LLCs, which is normally a good idea. We can talk about that in a second. And they went through a business valuation specialist, like he was talking about, to figure out how much the business was worth. And they went through a commercial appraiser to figure out how much the buildings were worth. And when they got to the sale was actually 4 separate sales. The 3 buildings were sold and then the business was sold separately. So if you look at the documents the attorney drew up, it was 4 separate sale documents.
So then the purchaser of the business had to negotiate with the new owners of the property to occupy the property.
In this case, the same buyer bought all 3 buildings and the business,
Okay.
but it was technically 4 separate transactions. Does that make sense?
But potentially that could be.
Potentially that could happen. Yep. And so if someone's buying the operating business and another party's buying the building, the party buying the building, they're gonna be interested in what kind of rent payment can we get, right? They're just gonna look at it as a rental investment.
Yeah, yeah.
You want to add?
Also, same thing, you divide that up, and when it comes back to the financing piece of it, you might be able to get, traditional financing for the real estate, and then just have the owner carry the note on just business. So, there's, by breaking it up, there's not just the benefits of, there's that ability to finance benefit that could come out of it as well.
Because you're gonna be more likely to lend to help someone buy the real estate than to buy the business.
Yep, because that's what the collateral, so on the business, if that business, going back to the balance sheet, if we don't see the assets for the business, but there is value there, there's name recognition, there's a client list, but that's not something we can lend into. We can lend into the buildings, but maybe the owner would be willing to carry the contract on just that component that does not have the underlying collateral.
Thank you.
What do you recommend on pricing when you have a perishable asset or good? You recommend staying at fixed or going variable and lowering your prices for discount to get rid of that asset that's going to disappear?
Meaning you have an excess of inventory and you're trying to get rid of the inventory?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's going to disappear.
Yeah, my first recommendation would be to try not to have an excess of inventory.
Can't happen. We have that every day.
But it can happen, yeah.
Inventory.
Yeah, if you Google things like just-in-time inventory system and things like that, that'd be a good thing to look at for a business to try to make sure that they don't have that problem. But yes, in some industries, that might be where a necessary discount would come in with inventory that had aged and lost value. Yeah, you see that from time to time. I wasn't trying to prove that discounts are always inappropriate, but just that people should be careful with them.
It shouldn't be your traditional, like your standard price.
That's right. It shouldn't be the standard, yeah. Unless you're like some of these clothing retailers that always artificially mark up just so they get a discount.
Car sales.
Yeah, car salesman, yeah.
General finance question, how often should a business owner review their financials? What should they be looking for during that review? For all of you.
At least annually. In good time would probably be the same time that you're doing, sitting down with your accountant to prepare taxes and stuff. You've got your year-end financials. instead of just handing it in and saying, can you get my taxes done? I'd say, can I get an appointment? Can I sit down with you? And can we look at these together? So, I'd be looking for, what are my margins? How have they changed from last year to this year? Am I starting to see those decrease? Maybe I need to relook at my pricing. So.
Yeah, at least annually would be great. I mean, obviously monthly would be even better. Occasionally you'll hear business coaches and people say you should look at your finances daily or weekly, and business owners, in my experience, just don't do that. But I think it is possible to discipline yourself every month to look at your profit and loss. If you're in a seasonal business, you'd want to compare September's profit and loss to last year's September profit and loss. If you're not in a seasonal business, you could just compare last month to the month prior, looking for changes in margin, looking for changes in sales and those kind of things. Looking for expense categories that have gotten up out of hand. Monthly, I think, is within the reach of most business owners, but yeah, golly, at a minimum annually.
At a minimum, I'd recommend at least quarterly.
What does that M&A stand for the, on the sales side, you said? What does that stand for?
Mergers and acquisitions.
Oh, mergers.
Chris, besides pricing, you coach business owners. What's the second major area besides pricing that you would recommend evaluating to grow a business?
I would say second most important would be marketing. A lot of marketing dollars are lost on marketing that is not targeted. So all marketing needs to be targeted to those people that are most likely to buy your products or services. And every marketing campaign needs to be tracked carefully for return on investment. And those marketing campaigns that aren't working, that don't have a really high ROI, return on investment, immediately cut the funding on those, let them die out, and put that funding into those that do actually work. Yeah, so targeted marketing would be second, and third would be strategic hiring. I talked to a business owner, one of the most successful Tri-Cities business owners of all time. He grew his business from himself to over 500 employees and then sold for tens of millions of dollars. And I said, I took him to lunch, and it wasn't to give him advice, it was to get advice. And I just asked him on his advice, and one of the things he said is, he said, Chris, I grew my business one strategic hire at a time. And I think that's a great way of thinking about growing a business. Not necessarily one client at a time, although we need them too. But the actual internal business is made up of people, and they need to be really, really good. If you've read Dave Ramsey's recent book, Entree Leadership, he recommends between 9 and 11 interviews per position. Most people hire after 1 or 2 interviews, or they hire friends, family, maybe they hire some fools. Yeah, you need to be much more intentional on hiring.
Here we are. If you follow your recommendation of increasing your prices, say 10% annually, how do you, and everything else stays the same, your services, your products are all the same, how do you justify that 10% increase to an unhappy customer that's saying, well, you did the same thing for me last month and now you're charging me 10% more?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't recommend increasing prices 10% every year. The amount by which you increase would be based on a lot of things within your industry. But I do recommend reevaluating prices every year. If you increase your prices 10% every year, they double after 7 years, which would not be the right thing for some industries. What I want a lot of business owners right now is to evaluate where their pricing is right now. And ask the question, and this could be done with market research, or it could be done with trial and error, it could be done a lot of different ways. If we raise the price 5%, or if we raise the price 10%, how many of our customers would just walk out the door? And for a lot of business owners with those smaller 5 to 10% increases, very few would walk out the door. As long as the quality is there, the product is excellent, the customer service is excellent, very few would walk out the door with a 5 to 10% price increase. And yet with a lot of businesses, a 5 to 10% price increase could literally double the profit, like I explained there. So I'm not telling everyone to just raise your prices 10% randomly. I'm telling people to consider it in their industry, consider a price increase. And most businesses will probably be surprised at how few customers they'll lose over one price increase. I am a member of a gym. I go, I probably should go more, but I enjoy it. And they sent a letter recently that said our prices are increasing. I think they went up 12%. Did I drop my gym membership? No, I doubt very many people did. They do an excellent job.
Okay. Thank you.
I know business owners who have gone years without a price increase.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you talk to them about it and they're like, yeah, if I increase prices, I'll lose customers. If I increase prices, I'll lose customers. And then all of a sudden they do it and nobody even says anything. I mean, they didn't even get feedback on it. And so they were so terrified to do it, but they were leaving that money on the table.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I meant to revisit it in the case of, Jane's printing and design, where if she raised prices 10%, she'd double her income. That's only in the hypothetical that all the customers stayed.
Sure.
But she could lose a lot of customers and still go up in income. Some people don't want to raise prices because they might lose a few customers. Losing a few customers might be okay. Some people are always going to be shopping for the lowest price. That's okay. You could let them go to your competitors. But if Jane raises prices by 10%, goes up to 1.1 million, but actually she only goes up to 1.08 million, 1,080,000, she still may have almost doubled her profit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Even though she lost. So just because a business owner loses some customers, doesn't mean the price increase was incorrect.
Good point.
Nick, you mentioned the benefits of having a financial or wealth advisor. For those that don't have one, what are the benefits? And secondly, if you do have one, what are some key questions to ask your financial advisor?
All right, those are some good questions. Man, I would think the ideal benefit of working with a financial advisor is they provide clarity on your financial future, hopefully. I know for people who are preparing for retirement, you're going from a very predictable income stream from your labor to, suddenly you have this IRA or 401k account that you're responsible for and that you need to figure out how much money can I take out of it each month to fulfill my lifestyle needs. And hopefully it's invested in a way that if there's a market decline or some sort of temporary event, I don't have to cut back on my lifestyle. And I think that's probably the primary reason that people work with financial advisor. And I think they do a great job of providing that sense of security and clarity there. Questions to ask your financial advisor. Just like a fun one could be like asking, what's your opinion on active management versus maybe index investing or broadly diversified portfolio? I think a lot of people are surprised when they see that over, 20-year period of time, maybe only 8% of active managers actually outperform the benchmark that they compare themselves to. And most of the studies show that's, primarily a factor of luck and just being on the right side of a macroeconomic force during that time period. And so, perhaps see if maybe you're overpaying for some of the mutual funds or ETFs in your portfolios if they have an active manager managing them. Because really how it works is any fee that's above what is necessary to get the job done is really detracting from your performance and really the assets and economic growth that you're entitled to.
Mentioned in the selling the business, the transaction structure, you had mentioned that sticking around that equity and earnings were two of the bullet points there. Can you explain a bit more about what that means?
Yeah, they certainly could be a part of the transaction structure. It's not guaranteed.
Right.
But on the equity side, it would really just be an exchange of the shares in your company for shares in the buyer's company, or in the case if they were merging into that surviving organization. And the hope is that firm would achieve a similar or hopefully higher growth rate than your existing company. And in my scenario, I said like, hey, this group is eventually going to try to sell to like a private equity group that's buying up all these small practices, mushing them all together, make them look like a bigger company, and then selling them for a higher earnings multiple later on. That's not every scenario, that could be the case. In terms of a earnout, essentially what that means is there's going to be some portion of your compensation that's going to be dictated by how well the company runs after it's been acquired. And in most cases, that's only going to happen if you stick around Because otherwise you don't really have any control over the performance of the company. That answer your question?
Yeah.
Thanks.
For all three of you, what makes you shake your head when entrepreneurs or business owners come to you for services? And you just go like, oh. Like that. You've probably seen some patterns, you know, as people come to you for services.
Go ahead.
Also, financial statement, when somebody comes in with financial statements that, you know, shows that they're losing a whole bunch of money and they wanna know, you know, can they get a loan? And, you know, with the explanations of, oh, yeah, but, you know, but I actually do better than that. It's, you know, the documentation that they're bringing in, and then I get a side story of why it's not accurate. It's like, again, back to the point of, look at it before you bring it in, you know, if it's not accurate, clean it up, because it's what we have to work on. So, inaccurate financials.
Okay.
Yep, similar to that, what makes us shake our heads is when a business owner comes in that's fairly established and still doesn't have 5 professionals on their team. So I recommend every business have at least 5 professionals that work for them. An attorney, a CPA, banker, financial advisor. And then the 5th one would probably be like a graphic design or marketing agency. That's at a minimum. Other professionals could be an IT service provider or insurance agent. But it's just interesting. You know, we know a lot of multimillionaires at PorterKinney, a lot of very successful business owners that they don't make 6 figures, they make 7 or 8 figures. How many of them use TurboTax as their CPA? 0%. How many use LegalZoom as their attorney? 0%. That's just not how high income successful people operate.
So I think the only time that where I shake my head is where I can see that there's a disconnect between what their goal is and the actions they're doing or what they're telling me. And so my favorite one might be an acronym I call OFE, which is Own for Employment. And so for an example, there was a financial advisor I was speaking with, just initial conversations with them. And I said, like, oh yeah, my goal is to grow the business to 500 million in assets under management, have all these employees, yada, yada, yada. And then, after he's done talking about the vision for the company, I'm like, so, when are you going to hire this next employee? And then he just breaks down like, oh, I just can't figure it out. I know I have to pay them this salary and it's going to impact my lifestyle. And so for me, it's more just, hey, when there's a disconnect between what your goals are and then what you're willing to handle and accomplish.
You brought up employee, that just triggers a conversation Chris, you and I had, was employees versus 1099s. Talk to us about that, because I know people wonder, should I hire an employee and go through that, or 1099 the better route to go? What's your counsel on that?
For most situations, it's going to be pretty strongly on one side or the other. If the person has a regular schedule with you, if they have a regular earning schedule, either they show up 9 to 5, they make 70,000 a year, they show up to your business, they're under your supervision, they use your computer, they sit in your office, that's clearly an employee. Whereas someone else, you pay them by the job, they have their own tools, they finish it when they want to finish it, they have their own LLC, that's clearly an independent contractor. So first of all, just go with the rules, and 90% of the time, it's going to be in one category or another. Occasionally, you have a gray area, and in that case, you may want to push it to what makes the most sense from a business standpoint. A 1099 is cheaper because you don't have to pay employment taxes. But a W-2 can attract maybe a higher level of talent because you could have some benefits and pay half of their employment taxes. So there's pros and cons. But you only consider the pros and cons when it actually is a gray area. Anyone else have a comment on that?
One question, resources you'd recommend, either on your topic that you talked about today, or just business finance in general? Chris, you talked about Entree Leadership, Dave Ramsey's book, I've read that one. What other books, podcasts, blogs that you would recommend?
So I'll start that off, and then obviously you guys could mention. I think there's 3 books that every business owner should read. There's obviously a lot of books that business owners should read, but you should at least read these three if you own a business. First is Stephen R. Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's sold more than 40 million copies. If you're not one of the 40 million people that's bought it, where are you? Why haven't you come to the table yet? Be one of those 40 million people, you won't be disappointed. Number 2 is The E-Myth, Revisited by Michael Gerber, another very top-selling famous business book. First came out in the 80s, rewritten in the 90s, still best-selling on Amazon to this day. And then number 3 is Good to Great by Jim Collins. Another top-selling business book. So those 3 would be my recommendations. If you want my top 10, ask me afterwards.
Sweet.
Well, I have a book, in accounting 101, like take an online business class about accounting 101, figure out how P&L works, how it affects the balance sheet. Have a base understanding of.
So specifically for my topic, there's a great book that you can buy online called Mergers and Acquisitions from A to Z. It's only a couple hundred pages, very, very readable if it's kind of a thing that you want to, DIY, do yourself. And then The E-Myth Revisited is a great book for business owners. Really good.
So let's thank our experts. Again, their information's on the back counter if you'd like to utilize their services. Their slides are gonna be emailed to you if you registered, and the video today will be placed on YouTube. If you know somebody that's like, oh, they should have been here today, even for that just great Q&A there. We also want to thank STCU for your sponsorship of Ask the Experts, making it free to participate. We're gonna do a drawing. So Nick, you brought a cool basket back there.
Very, very nice gift basket.
Did you guys bring something that Kimber? You had,
I brought a $50 gift card to Porter's Barbecue.
oh, say.
Porter's Barbecue is
Oh, yes.
owned by PorterKinney.
All right. Owned by PorterKinney. You're like, well, there's barbecue in there. Let's throw a card in there really fast.
It's owned by a person named PorterKinney.
Okay. You have some too?
No, we did not.
Okay. A hug from Sarah on the way out. Yes, okay. Sean Brewer, you get the basket in the back. Thank you, Community First and HFG. And for the Porter's gift card, Katie Bowman. Congrats. Would you do us a favor and fill out the survey form that you came in with? You can just flip it over on your table when you're gone. If you are on Zoom today, if you use the QR code to give us your feedback today, we appreciate that. And tell your colleagues to join us each and every month. Ask the Experts is on the 3rd Tuesday of the month, typically from 3 to 4:30. And the next one is November 12th. Our topic is employment tax and expansion issues. I like to call it, these are gonna be some legal eagles here. It's like what you don't know can hurt you when it comes to the legal field. So, and I tease that finance stuff, tax stuff are like the vegetables, right? They're not as cool as like someone like, oh, let's talk about conflict in the workplace and all that. But boy, nutrition is so important to your health. So thank you for being here and making this a priority. And the next month as well, having a good tax person on your side, having a good legal attorney on your side is gonna also be great for your business health. So hopefully you'll join us again. May your business continue to prosper in this last quarter of 2024. See you next time.